Welcome back to the Bar Exam Toolbox podcast. Today we're talking about how many hours you need to spend studying to pass the bar exam as part of our Quick Tips series. Your Bar Exam Toolbox hosts are Alison Monahan and Lee Burgess. That's me. We are here to demystify the bar exam experience so you can study effectively, stay sane, and hopefully pass and move on with your life. We're the co-creators of the Law School Toolbox, the Bar Exam Toolbox, and the career-related website Career Dicta. Alison also runs the Girls Guide to Law School. If you enjoy the show, please leave a review on your favorite listening app and check out our sister podcast, the Law School Toolbox podcast. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can reach us via the contact form on barexamtoolbox.com, and we'd love to hear from you. And with that, let's get started. Welcome back. Today we're talking about how many hours you really need to spend studying to pass the bar exam. But before we get into specific numbers, it is important to note we are talking about the number of hours that we recommend you spend studying. In other words, some people may be able to pass the bar after studying less hours than we recommend. But preparing for and taking the bar exam is time-consuming and expensive. So ideally, you should not approach bar prep as a game of seeing how few hours you can get away with and still pass. That is why we will talk about our recommendations for a minimum number of hours rather than the number of hours you may be able to get away with studying. Additionally, it is important to remember that bar prep is not a one-size-fits-all process, and the number of hours that you need to spend studying varies depending on individual and life circumstances. In particular, there are two initial circumstances that you will need to consider to determine the number of hours that you should plan to spend studying for the bar exam. The first circumstance is whether you plan to take the bar exam with timing accommodations. If you anticipate receiving accommodations that allow you time and a half or double time on the exam, you should plan to spend extra time studying. Timed practice is a crucial part of successful bar prep strategy. And if you are taking the exam with timing accommodations, timed practice will take you that much longer. You need to account for that when determining the number of hours it will take for you to adequately prepare. The second initial factor to consider is whether you plan to study full-time or part-time. If you plan to study part-time, it will likely be over a longer period. That means that by the end of the period, the things that you studied at the beginning will be further from the front of your memory than if you were studying full-time for a shorter period. So if you plan on studying part-time over a longer period, you need to plan to spend some extra time at the end of your study period to put everything together. With that, let's get to some baseline recommendations. At a minimum, you should spend about 400 to 500 total hours studying for the bar exam. This works out to about 45 hours a week for 8 to 10 weeks or 25 hours a week for 16 weeks, with some additional time during the last 2 weeks. However, if you anticipate taking the bar exam with timing accommodations, you should increase your minimum study time to 500 to 600 hours. Remember, if you are taking the exam with time and a half accommodations, every timed practice question you do will take you time and a half to complete. So make sure to account for that as you consider the number of hours that you should plan to spend studying. Now that we have established some baseline goals, let's talk about what you should be doing during all of these hours. Staring down the barrel of 400 to 600 hours of studying over the next several months may sound daunting. That is why a personalized study schedule is a key component of bar prep success. Whether you create your own study schedule or customize a template schedule to fit your needs, it is important to break down these hundreds of hours into daily blocks of time. Start by deciding how many hours you can realistically spend studying per day and per week. Let me emphasize the word realistically. Be honest with yourself here. If you know that your brain is good for about 6 hours of deep studying per day max, then do not create a schedule that requires you to do 8 to 10 hours of deep work daily. Remember, the quality of the hours you spend studying matters as much as the number of hours. So set yourself up for success with your study schedule by being realistic about your daily max from the beginning. There is no point in spending 10 hours mindlessly watching lectures without retaining any information. In fact, you should not count any of your study time towards your minimum hours goal unless it is meaningful, focused study time. By meaningful, focused study time, we mean time that helps you either learn and understand information, commit the information to memory, or practice applying what you have learned. And it is important to balance all three of these things: learning the material, memorizing the material, and applying what you have learned in practice throughout your study period. Once you have realistic goals for a daily and weekly number of hours, subdivide that time into smaller blocks of work. As noted above, you must divide your time to balance learning the material, memorizing the material, and applying what you have learned in practice throughout the study period. Ideally, you should move through every bar exam subject at least twice during your study time. The first time, focus on learning and understanding the material, as well as applying it in practice questions. In your second review of each subject, focus on memorization and more practice. Notice the importance of incorporating practice into your schedule from the beginning. This will help you in two ways. First, applying the material in practice questions will clarify your understanding of the rules and help you remember them. And second, doing practice questions from the beginning will ensure that you develop the skills necessary to write bar exam questions and answer MBE questions. As you divide your days into smaller blocks of time, make sure that you devote time to all parts of the exam: the MBE, MEE, and MPT, or essays and performance test if you are in California. If you are studying full-time, plan to spend time daily on timed essay and MBE practice. If you are studying part-time, you will probably have to spread this practice out throughout the week. For example, you can alternate between MBE and essay practice every other day. Additionally, do not forget about scheduling time for MPT practice. If you are studying full-time, try to incorporate at least one timed MPT per week into your study schedule. If you are feeling particularly uncomfortable in this area, increase this number. Alternatively, if you are studying part-time over a longer period of time, you may want to spend some time at the very beginning of your study period to master the MPT. The MPT is skill-based, so it does not require any memorization. If you master this early, you can spend your time closer to the exam focusing on other areas of the exam, ensuring that you have enough time at the end of the study period for memorization. Now that we have talked generally about how to divide your study time, let's talk about some circumstances that may impact how you should prioritize your study time and how to adjust your study schedule accordingly. One circumstance is whether you have taken the bar exam before. If you took the bar exam before and did not pass, it is important to self-evaluate. Determine what study strategies worked for you before and which did not. Make sure that you replace the ones that were not effective with active, quality study time. Additionally, take notes of areas in which you particularly struggled versus areas in which you scored higher. This may be particular sections of the test. For example, if you scored fairly high on the written portions but bombed the MBE, you need to incorporate additional MBE practice into your schedule from day one. Weak and strong areas may also be particular subjects. For example, if you know that you feel fairly comfortable with criminal law and procedure, you may skip to a quick substantive review of that subject and focus mostly on practice questions. On the other hand, if you know that you did not understand the rules of civil procedure well enough to pass the exam, you may devote extra time to that subject. Overall, you want to use what you learned from taking the exam before to personalize your study schedule. If you are a first-time bar exam taker, you may still notice that certain parts of the exam come easier to you than others. For example, if you know that you are comfortable with multiple choice questions but struggle with timing on essay questions, take that into account when creating your study schedule. Specifically, make sure that you incorporate extra time to devote to timed practice MEE essays. If you are a recent law school graduate, you may also have an easier time relearning subjects that you studied at the end of law school, as opposed to subjects that you took at the beginning of law school, or subjects that you did not study during law school at all. For example, if you took con law and wills during your last year of law school and have those rules fresh in your mind, You may need to spend less time relearning those rules than subjects you took several years ago, such as torts, contracts, and CivPro. On the other hand, if you're taking the exam after several years of legal practice, you will likely need a different study strategy than a recent law school graduate. For example, if you are several years removed from law school, you may need a pretty in-depth substantive review of any subjects that are not part of your daily practice. However, if you practice in federal court, civil procedure rules may be second nature. In that case, you could devote less time to memorizing the federal rules of civil procedure and spend that extra time on subjects that are far from your mind. Additionally, experienced litigators may find the brief and memo-style MPTs easier than transactional attorneys or those coming straight out of law school, because those resemble what you do in your day-to-day practice. But all practicing attorneys may face an additional challenge getting back into study mode for the exam. These are all circumstances to consider as you create your personal study schedule. To summarize, most people should plan to spend a minimum of 400 to 600 hours studying for the bar exam. Where you fall on this spectrum and how you should use these hours will vary depending on your personal and life circumstances. So it is important to be honest with yourself as you create your personal bar exam study schedule. Give yourself enough time to adequately prepare and focus on learning techniques that work for you. Remember, only quality study time counts towards the total number of hours that you spend studying. Although studying for the bar exam is far from a one-size-fits-all process, most people benefit from a general strategy as they start planning a personalized study schedule. Start early and practice often. We hope that you find our recommendations helpful as you think about your bar prep strategy. If you have any questions about creating a personalized study schedule for the bar exam, or anything else related to the bar study process, please reach out to us through our website and contact form. We can help you create a personalized schedule, put you in touch with one of our excellent bar exam tutors, and point you toward other helpful resources. If you enjoyed this episode of the Bar Exam Toolbox podcast, please take a second to leave a review and rating on your favorite listening app. We'd really appreciate it, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss anything. If you are still in law school, you might also like to check out our popular Law School Toolbox podcast as well. If you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to reach out to Lee and Alison at lee@barexamtoolbox.com or allison@barexamtoolbox.com, or you can always contact us via our website contact form at barexamtoolbox.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk soon.